All right, today we are digging into one of history's all-time greatest mysteries, the legendary curse of King Tut's tomb. So was it a deadly hex from an ancient pharaoh, or is there something, well, a lot more logical going on? Let's find out. This is the line that started it all. This chilling warning was supposedly found at the entrance to the tomb. Death shall come on swift wings. It's the kind of thing that kicks off a global legend of terror and revenge, right? And believe me, this legend took off almost instantly. Look at this timeline. November 1922, they find the tomb. Just 5 months later, bam, the guy footing the bill, Lord Carnarvon, is dead. And by 1929, the newspapers were connecting a whopping 22 deaths to the discovery. The whole world was talking about it. So let's rewind. Let's go back to the very beginning. This should have been one of the greatest archaeological triumphs ever, but right from the start, it was just overshadowed by this feeling of dread. Okay, get this. On the very day they opened the tomb, Howard Carter's pet canary, his little golden bird, was eaten by a cobra. Now, for the local Egyptian workers, this was a huge deal. A cobra is the symbol of the pharaohs, of royalty. To them, it was like the pharaoh's spirit had struck down the very thing that led the explorers to the treasure. This was omen number one. So the dead canary was one thing, but then came the first human tragedy. And the death of the expedition's sponsor, Lord Carnarvon, wasn't just a sad event. Oh no. It was surrounded by these bizarre, seemingly supernatural moments that made the whole world believe a curse was at play. And here's how this crazy story was built. It all started with something so mundane, a mosquito bite, but then he nicks it while shaving and it gets badly infected. Then, on April 5th, 1923, he dies. And right at that exact moment, two absolutely wild things happen. All the lights across Cairo suddenly go out. And thousands of miles away, back in England, his dog Susie lets out a howl and just drops dead. Coincidence? The world was screaming, no way. Lord Carnarvon was just the first domino to fall. By the end of the decade, the body count, at least according to the papers, had hit a staggering 22. It really seems like the curse was just getting warmed up. And the list of victims just kept growing. You had a financier, George J. Gould, who dies of a fever the day after his visit. The radiologist who x-rayed the mummy, Sir Archibald Reed, he died suddenly too. But the most chilling story has to be Carter's secretary, Richard Bethel. After his mysterious death, his father, Lord Westbury, was so distraught he jumped to his death. It felt like nobody connected to the tomb was safe. So with every new death, you can just imagine the headlines. The newspapers were having a field day, screaming about the pharaoh's revenge. And then, this media storm combined with one final shocking discovery. And that's what turned this spooky story into what most people believed was cold, hard fact. This was the smoking gun, the moment that sealed the deal for everyone. When they did the autopsy on the mummy, they found a lesion on King Tut's cheek, in the exact same spot as Lord Carnarvon's deadly mosquito bite, a 3,000-year-old wound that seemed to predict a modern death. After that, for the public, there was no more debate. The curse was absolutely real. Or was it? This is where the story pivots and gets truly fascinating. Because when you start to peel back all those layers of myth and spooky coincidences, a very, very different story starts to take shape. It's time to separate the fact from the fiction. So let's put on our detective hats. We're going to go through the so-called evidence that built this whole legend, and we're going to deconstruct it, piece by piece, starting with that infamous warning. Okay, that terrifying inscription, "Death shall come on swift wings," the truth is, it never existed. There was no tablet, no carving, nothing. It was literally invented by an eager journalist who kept pestering the team about a curse. They finally just gave him a little smile, and that was all he needed to make up the most famous line of the entire legend. So what about all those creepy coincidences? Well, that citywide blackout in Cairo? Turns out the power grid there in the 1920s was super unreliable. Power cuts happened all the time. And poor Susie, Lord Carnarvon's dog, well, when you actually factor in the time difference between Egypt and England, she died hours later, not at the exact same moment at all. So, if it wasn't an ancient curse, what in the world was going on? Well, this is where science, history, and a bit of good old-fashioned common sense come in to offer some much more plausible, if, slightly less dramatic explanations. For starters, Lord Carnarvon was already in poor health. He actually went to Egypt for the warm climate because he had lung issues. And you have to remember, this was 1923. Penicillin didn't exist yet. A simple infected cut from shaving could and often did kill people. Some scientists even think there could have been a toxic mold sealed in the tomb. And that matching lesion on Tut's cheek, it was reported by a rival newspaper that was furious that the Times had exclusive rights to the story. It was a scoop born from competition, not facts. And if you want the cold, hard data, here it is. In 2002, the British Medical Journal actually crunched the numbers. They looked at the lifespans of everyone who was present when the tomb was opened. The results? There was no statistically significant difference between those who went inside and those who stayed out. The curse, scientifically speaking, had zero effect. And here's maybe the biggest hole in the whole curse story. If it was real, wouldn't it have gone after the main culprit first? Howard Carter, the guy who literally broke the seal, lived for another 16 years. Lady Evelyn, Lord Carnarvon's daughter and one of the first people inside, lived to be 78. And the doctor who did the autopsy on King Tut himself, he made it all the way to 87. Look, the curse is a fantastic story, but the truth is actually way more powerful. The real legacy of King Tut isn't about revenge from beyond the grave. It's about how a forgotten boy king was actually saved by the fact that he was forgotten. The reality is, back in his day, King Tut wasn't a major player. He was the product of royal inbreeding, which left him with a lot of health problems, including a clubfoot. After he died young, the pharaohs who came after him literally wiped his name from the history books. And that single act, trying to erase him, is the very reason his tomb survived, untouched by robbers for thousands of years. And this gets to the very heart of ancient Egyptian belief. For them, real death, true oblivion, wasn't when your body gave out. It was when your name was spoken for the very last time. So you see, the real curse was the one Tut's successors put on him, the curse of being forgotten. And for 3,000 years, it worked. But then Howard Carter came along. And ironically, the so-called curse that followed his discovery did the exact opposite. It made Tutankhamun the most famous pharaoh in history. So when reporters would ask Howard Carter about the curse, his simple answer, "I am still alive," had a much deeper meaning. Because thanks to him, King Tutankhamun could finally say the exact same thing.